The Hidden War: Parental Abuse as Spiritual Attack. Welcome back. I'm Adeline Atlas, 11 times published author, and this is the Parental Abuse and Alienation in Spiritual Warfare series, where we break silence, dismantle generational strongholds, and reclaim divine inheritance. This episode is not for the faint of heart. It's for the cycle breakers, the scapegoats, the chosen ones who were born into systems that tried to erase them and who are now ready to take their power back. We are here to expose what many still dare not name: that parental abuse isn't just emotional harm. It's spiritual sabotage. It's a calculated attack designed to fracture your identity, siphon your energy, and disconnect you from your divine mission. Let's be clear. We are not talking about discipline. We are not talking about parents who made mistakes while trying to do their best. We are talking about targeted, patterned abuse from the people who were supposed to protect you. We are talking about word curses spoken over children, about energy theft disguised as parental duty, about manipulation, neglect, and gaslighting that doesn't just leave emotional wounds, it leaves spiritual scars. And we're going to start where most therapists won't, with the truth that this is war. Let's define what we mean by parental abuse. It exists on a spectrum. On one end, we have the obvious: physical violence, screaming, shaming, humiliation, excessive control, and authoritarian punishment. But on the other end, the side most people never see is the covert abuse. The parent who never hits you, but controls every decision you make. The one who tells you you're too sensitive every time you cry. The one who guilt trips you for having boundaries. The one who withholds affection unless you perform. The one who plays the victim to make you feel like the abuser. The one who turns your confidence into arrogance, your intuition into rebellion, your authenticity into a threat. That's not parenting. That's psychological warfare. But today, we go deeper than psychology. Because beneath the gaslighting and the guilt is a spiritual operation, one designed to stop you from ever waking up to who you really are. Why are so many chosen ones born into abusive bloodlines? It's not random, it's strategy. Because the enemy, whatever name you want to give, it always strikes early. And it strikes where you're most vulnerable, the home. Because if it can fracture you at the root, you'll spend your whole life questioning your worth, your voice, your gifts. You'll waste decades trying to get love from people who trained you to self-abandon. You'll think you're broken when really, you were just targeted. You weren't hated because you were bad. You were hated because you were bright. You weren't silenced because you were wrong. You were silenced because you were accurate. You weren't shamed because you were weak. You were shamed because you were powerful, and they knew it before you did. And when I say they, I don't just mean the parent. I mean the spiritual entities, generational spirits, and family systems that were threatened by your light. Because some families don't just pass down trauma, they pass down strongholds. And when a child is born to end that line, the system goes into attack mode. That's what we're here to expose. Let's talk about how this attack begins. It often starts with language. Small phrases, seemingly innocent. But they are not just words, they are spiritual implants. You're just too much. Why can't you be more like your sister? You'll never survive without me. No one else would ever love you. These are not critiques. These are word curses. And when repeated over time, especially during early development, they don't just shape your self-esteem. They shape your nervous system, your identity map, and your internal dialogue. You begin to repeat those phrases to yourself. You internalize them as truth. And just like that, the enemy no longer needs to attack from the outside, because it now lives inside your mind. This is where shame gets programmed, where guilt becomes your default, where confidence feels dangerous. And every time you try to rise, that internal voice reminds you, stay small, stay quiet, stay safe. But it's a lie, and it's time to name it. The real goal of parental abuse is to break the spirit, not just emotionally, but energetically. To disconnect you from the part of yourself that knows, that remembers, that carries divine coding. Because that part, the soul, is a threat. If your soul remains intact, you become a truth teller, a whistleblower, a liberator, a light bearer. And light bearers dismantle illusions. They end bloodline lies. They expose generational spirits. They call out what others cover up. So how do you stop a child from becoming that? You break them before they can build. You fracture their identity before they speak. You make them doubt their own intuition before it can guide them. You create confusion around who they are, so they spend their life looking outside themselves for validation, safety, and permission. That's how parental abuse functions as spiritual sabotage. Let's go deeper. One of the most common traits among survivors of parental abuse is something called soul fragmentation. This is more than trauma. This is when parts of the self split off to survive. The part of you that knew something was wrong had to be buried. The part that felt rage had to be silenced. The part that dreamed had to be put to sleep. Because if you stayed fully present, you wouldn't survive. So, you split. And what looks like people-pleasing, codependency, or emotional detachment is actually a child still trying to keep the soul intact at any cost. But here's the cost. You don't feel whole. You're successful, but hollow. Loved, but unseen. Awake, but exhausted. Because your energy is still leaking into places where your soul was once stolen. And unless you reclaim those pieces, you stay in spiritual limbo. That brings us to energy harvesting. Many abusive parents don't just harm their children, they feed off them. Emotionally, spiritually, energetically. The child becomes a source of attention, admiration, emotional regulation, or even financial control. This is what I call energetic vampirism, and it's one of the most covert forms of abuse. The parent gets angry and you calm them. They lie and you cover for them. They fail and you succeed, so they can take credit. They break and you heal, just so the family can keep functioning. Your entire identity becomes a resource. And in the spiritual world, that is called theft. Because your life force was not given to you so someone else could survive. It was given so you could lead, build, liberate, create. And the moment you stop leaking it into black holes of dysfunction, everything changes. Let's talk about the long-term spiritual consequences of parental abuse. Number 1, identity confusion. When your first teachers were abusers, your map of self becomes unreliable. You don't know who you are without a role, without performance, without pain. You start to define yourself by the way others treat you. And when you're treated poorly, you internalize that treatment as truth. But it's not truth. It's a lie. And healing means separating who you are from what they projected. Number 2, susceptibility to spiritual deception. Survivors of childhood abuse often become prime targets for spiritual predators. Why? Because the inner compass is distorted. If abuse was your baseline for love, you'll attract abusers again and again until you rewrite the pattern. Spiritual bypassing, cultish loyalty, narcissistic partners, false gurus, all of these systems prey on unhealed survivors. Not because you're weak, but because your light is magnetic. And until you reclaim your discernment, you'll confuse attraction with alignment. Number 3, generational bondage. This is the cycle most are afraid to admit. The abused child becomes the enabler. The lost child becomes the avoider. The scapegoat becomes the truth teller and is punished. And unless one person breaks the chain, it continues. That's why healing from parental abuse isn't just personal. It's ancestral. When you stop performing, stop appeasing, stop explaining, and finally stand in your truth, you don't just heal yourself. You dismantle the entire illusion that kept the system alive. Let me say it clearly. You are not crazy. You are not broken. You are not ungrateful. You are not selfish. You were born into a war you didn't ask for, but you are the one who will end it. Because now you see it. You see the word curses. You see the theft. You see the control. You see the game. And once you see it, you cannot go back. You don't need their validation. You don't need their apology. You don't need their permission. You only need one thing, the decision to reclaim your light. And that brings us to our final truth. You were not attacked because you were weak. You were attacked because your light scared them. The enemy tried to break you before you knew your power. They used your parents. They used your childhood. They used the people you trusted most. But guess what? It didn't work. Because here you are, awake, listening, remembering. And now we fight back. Not with vengeance, with clarity, with healing, with boundaries, with truth, with the sword of our voice and the shield of divine discernment. This is the hidden war. But it's no longer hidden. Hi, I'm Adeline Atlas, 11 times published author, and what you just watched is part of my signature program, the Chosen One series inside School of Soul. This series is not just a course, it's a blueprint for those who know they were different from the start. The black sheep, the scapegoat, the truth teller, the cycle breaker. Inside, you'll discover the family roles playbook, the golden child, the scapegoat, the enabler, the lost child, and how to finally step out of the part you were cast in without consent. How the black sheep becomes the goat, turning rejection into radical transformation in leadership. How to break generational curses and rewrite ancestral contracts so the pain stops with you. And how to recognize and escape modern forms of spiritual and technological targeting, from gang stalking to synthetic synchronicity. This isn't just about survival. It's about awakening, about reclaiming your voice, your lineage, and your destiny as one of the chosen ones. Click the link below to access the full series now, because the role ends the moment you decide it does, and the real script begins with you.